Hello, we are going to go over trigonometric functions and what they look like on graphs and what are some key points we want to look out for on the unit circle that changes the way that these graphs look like. So let's start off with the basics, which is the sine, cosine, and tangent relationships of a triangle. As you may look over at these unit circle, you can see as we go around the unit circle and counterclockwise, we form these different kinds of triangles that have to do with the horizontal line here. So if we were going to describe what the sine value of pi over 6 is, we'd look at this hypotenuse right here and the x value right here, which is currently unknown, and the y value right here. So let's go over what sine means. Sine on a triangle is the opposite side over the hypotenuse. The cosine is the relationship between the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. And the tangent relationship is the opposite side of the angle and the adjacent side of the angle. Now, some key points on a unit circle to look out for are 0 degrees or 0 radians, 90 degrees or pi over 2 radians, pi radians or 180 degrees, 270 degrees or 3 pi over 2 radians, and 2 pi radians or 360 degrees. Now what we want to look at is, so let's say we have a cosine value. Well, each of these lines is going to be 1 radius away from the origin. Now, if we were going to say, what is the sine value of 0 degrees, we'd look at, so the radius would be 1, and the x value is going to be 1 as well. So the adjacent, which is the x value, is going to be 1, and it's going to be over 1 because that is what the hypotenuse value of that line is. Let's try a different example. So here is pi over 2. Let's find the cosine of pi over 2. Well, we want to look at the x value, which is clearly 0, and we will put it over the hypotenuse, which is always going to be 1, because each of the radiuses, or radii, I should say, are 1. So 0 over 1 equals 0. So the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. And similarly, as you go over to this side, this value for cosine is going to be the same as this side for cosine, because they're equally, as an absolute value, the same value, except this side is going to be negative for all cosine values. The reason why is this is in the negative x direction. As you can see now, is that cosine is very closely related to what the x values are. So if the x value is negative, cosine is going to be negative, and if x is positive, cosine is going to be positive, which would be this side. For sine, it's going to be a little different, but pretty close. So sine is going to be all the y values. So if you're going to look at the y value, for instance, of 0 degrees, that's going to be 0 over the radius, which is 1. So that's going to be 0 because there's no y value here. Now, if we want to do pi over 2, there is a y value of 1 over the radius 1, which is going to give us a value of 1. And as you go over to this side, it's going to be 0 because the y value here compared to the origin is 0. And As you go down here, this is going to be -1 because it is -1 units down over the 1 unit radius. Now, if you want to look at the trends of the various different trigonometric graphs, here you can see same thing going on here. So let's assume this is 0, pi over 2, and pi. As you can see, when sine is 0, which is right here, the y value is 0, which is also going to give it a value of 0. Now let's say the x value is pi over 2. So let's go to pi over 2 and look at the y value, which is 1, and 1 over 1 is going to give us a value of 1. And as you go back over, as we said, pi is going to have a 0 y value, which is going to give us 0 again. So the sine graph is going to oscillate like this as a pattern, and it's very similar to cosine, but it's just shifted a little bit over to the left or the right, depending on which way you want to look at it. So for cosine, let's say that the x value is 0. The x value is going to be 1. So 1 over 1 is going to give you a value of 1. Pi over 2 is going to give you a value of 0 for x. So 0 over 1 is going to give you 0. And pi right here, is a x value of -1, which is going to be -1 over the 1 unit for the radius, which is going to be -1. So I hope you can see the different trends that are happening between the sine and the cosine values. Obviously, tangent is just going to kind of compile this. As you can see, if you look at the unit circle, you can determine what kind of values you're going to get from different radians. It's just a little bit different. So are these inverse, not inverse, but cosecant is just the reciprocal of sine. Secant is a reciprocal of cosecant, and so is cotangent. So they just look a little different. They have just different values because you can't have zeros on the denominators, so that's why you might see these asymptotes right about here. So obviously you can tell where cosecant might not be able to have a value because you'll get a 0 on the denominator. So I hope this helps with all your trigonometric questions, and thanks for watching.